Okay, welcome everyone. This is the third meeting of the Government Transition Advisory Committee's budget work group. Today is April 1st, and we will be here from 4 to 5:30. My name is Julia Meyer. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Engagement and Community Participation Manager for the transition. Your chair, Terry, is going to facilitate today's meeting. Next slide, please. I'm just going to go over some meeting logistics. This meeting is being live streamed on YouTube. A copy of the meeting recording will be posted on the transition website under past meetings and events. For today's meeting, we have closed captioning available. To access that, you can click on the CC button on the bottom of your screen. For committee members, please take a moment to change your chat settings to everyone so that folks listening in or watching can see the chat. And please remember that the chat is part of the public meeting record. For community members, we have the Zoom Q&A feature available. You can submit questions, comments through the Q&A function. We may not answer all of the questions live in the meeting, but we do read them and they also become part of the public meeting record. At today's meeting, we're not taking verbal public comment, but you can submit public comment at any time by calling 311 or through the transition website or by emailing us at transition@portlandoregon.gov. And if you want to give verbal public comment, you can do so at our next Government Transition Advisory Committee meeting, which is on April 9th. I think with that, I'm turning it over to Terry to review the agenda.
Okay, so this is the agenda. We're going to have some business, and then we'll walk through our early draft of the budget recommendations document, which includes a possible budget process that we'll talk through first. And then we'll talk about the stakeholder engagement piece. And then we'll do some next steps. Next slide, please. Okay, excused absence. You're having trouble hearing me? All right. Expecting everybody here. Jose has chosen not to participate in this work group due to some time constraints, but he will participate when he can. Nobody else indicated they are unable to attend, so we attendance. Need to approve March 18th meeting summary. Does anybody have any recommended changes, revisions?
I move approval.
Move for approval, Fred.
Zach will second.
Zach seconds, I think. Anybody opposed? Don't see any. So I'm going to assume that those are passed along favorably. Next slide. Well, it's April 1st. It's April Fool's Day. And purely as a good team player, I will read the working agreements, as has been our custom. So our expectations of each other include, in discussions, challenge ideas rather than individuals, offer constructive suggestions, approach different opinions with curiosity, seek to understand, keep the needs and concerns of the local community and the larger region in the forefront of our work, arrive on time, and prepared to the best of your ability. Let the group know if you're unable to attend the meeting. Co-chairs, that's me and me, will aim to incorporate tools or breathers should you need it. Keep multitasking to a minimum, keep focus on the objectives of the meeting, utilize co-chairs to note additional topics for discussions and submit comments in writing via email. Next slide. Honor decisions of the group, contribute to the overall success of the group by finding ways to participate best meet your needs. Step up, step back, collectively work to ensure that every member who wants to be heard is heard, embrace conflict, work with your fellow committee members and staff in ways to give each other feedback. Co-chairs will aim to incorporate various feedback tools and use I statements. Next slide. Okay, so here's where we are. And this is our timeline that we reviewed last meeting, and it will help sort of set the framework for what we're going to discuss for the rest of the meeting. But we're here at work group meeting 3, set to present our draft recommendations to GTAC at the May 15th meeting. So we'll have one more work group between then and to finalize our draft recommendations. I think this will become more important and clearer later. Any comments, suggestions, questions on this? Oh, okay. It says here that staff are working on a summer engagement plan that they'll share with us in April for so it's going to be a big GTAC summer, and this committee will be part of the other committees doing a lot of work too. So there you go. Next slide, please. Okay, so to get started on our recommendations document, it was important, I think, for us, for me, if we're going to talk about engagement into the budget process, we just sort of have to understand the process itself, which will also require that we understand the process as it is and what the process could be given.
You're still garbling on occasion, Terry. It's intermittent, but
okay.
Sorry, but
let me try and wing this a little bit. I have a single screen problem and doesn't like having multiple windows at the same time. It's a delicate flower. So it's important that we understand the process. And now that we've taken a look at some research, we can see what those processes might look like. And so I felt like we kind of needed to put together a best guess of what the process could be like based on the documents that we were given from the budget office. And then using some of the peer city research. And the idea here is that we're going to actually just go ahead and go to the next slide, I guess, to get a flavor for what we're talking about. So this is, again, our kind of a best guess of a timeline for a budget process. And the idea here is that we map the current budget process and their activities with a set of engagement that we could foresee as an improvement. And it relates, to one of our main recommendations is that we want to get earlier, more, better engagement into this process. And so the idea here too is then we'll discuss this and then maybe send it over to the transition and the budget office to get their sort of first impression reactions and input. And then we'll put this into a proposal for the feedback, at least initial feedback, and then big summer. So that's where this is coming from. And then before I open it up, I think, we did get a memo from Janice that I think is thinking similarly and has some great suggestions, somewhat similar to this, but maybe a little bit more detailed and knowledgeable. But it's thinking the right way and asking the right questions, and I'd like to be able to fold her materials into this as we refine it between now and our next meeting. That said, any comments on that big overview before I walk through this a little bit more? Zach,
I don't have any.
No, I think that's fine. What do you mean by a trial budget resolution?
Yeah, okay, so let me walk through it a little bit.
Okay.
And some of this is based on current practice. And for example, trial budget is something that I found in a couple other of the peer cities. And it seems to track our the current process for current appropriation levels that are happening in September. And other cities sort of call that, the start. Here's a trial budget. Here's a really rough outline of where we're starting based on the economic outlook and what we're thinking about. Everybody can start here and start sending comments now. I mean, that's sort of the idea behind that September trial budget sort of thing.
Okay, so that would include a question here, Terry. That includes, for instance, the current council's, the mayor's 5% constraint.
I guess it probably
have your economic
should.
outlook and then current appropriation levels is sort of like this current year's budget, FY, say, 23, 24. And then a trial budget resolution be in light of what the economic outlook and the revenue forecasts are. Right. So here's kind of a reset. It's a trial budget. Let's all work off of this new figure. General fund and dedicated funds, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly right.
Okay.
And it's I think the earliest opportunity for people to comment. It is like here's the kickoff. Here's what our initial thinking is. The public should be able to talk about that initial thinking, and it should be out in public. And so that's
right.
That's the engagement that we lay over the top of this process.
Yeah. For instance, how many members of the public now know that there's a 5% constraint on general fund funded agencies?
Exactly.
And they still keep wanting to come up with new programs, which will be paid by the Clean Energy Fund, I'm sure. Sorry.
So again, walking through it, that's the September timeframe. Okay. In our current process in December, the mayor comes out with initial budget guidance that's a little bit more specific, I guess, than a 5% cut. There's more specifics to it. But that should be a presentation to the council, and the council should be holding an open hearing on that. That has some public input and engagement involved. And then, kicking it off into real gear in January and February with the early budget scoping, the budget kickoff. That's when maybe another council resolution is presented so the council can consider it. The advisory bodies start kicking off their work. And again, listening sessions, a resolution that sets the calendar in advance, like other cities have. The budget hearings are all scheduled way back in January, February. Then February and March, the service areas submit their budgets. Workshops happen in the council. Those workshops allow the public involvement. And in that period, you get 4 in-district budget hearings. And, that's that's when currently there's the full council workshops by service area this year. So I guess next slide. And so the charter requires the budget to be introduced to the council by May 5th. So that's like the big legislative event. And so with the new council, there's probably an opportunity for new rules and new opportunities for comment and involvement. You know, you refer the budget to a committee, you hold a briefing that day or the next day, as some other cities do. Allow some initial public comment at that. And then just sort of the legislative process kicks in, but it'll be a new legislative process that might have subcommittee hearings, committee of the whole will have hearings, and then there's the formal tax supervision and conservation commission hearing, which I don't completely understand. But those are more formal things. And then, you know, there's a final budget hearing with the final, you know, but public comment prior to adoption in June. So that was sort of a crack at a full schedule. And I want to compare it a little bit to what Janice had sent us. And I want to, you know, like I said, run this sort of thing by the transition in the budget office and see what they think. But now, Fred, Zach, what are you guys thinking?
Yeah, sorry. Fred has his hand up.
Yeah, Fred, go ahead.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you, Terry. Committee of the whole, in my parlance, is the legislative body, the 12 counselors, which is now according to the current budget process, is the budget advisory committee for the city of Portland. That option that they've selected, I think Janice's memo talks about the options, different ORS options. And so I'm wondering if we want to clarify that, because they hold hearings, then they recommend a version to the full council. Well, they are the full council. And so there's a little, people looking at this may think, well, what's the difference? And it seems, and that may be something that Tate might be considering, of the recommended like rules of procedure, probably, and I don't have it handy and I haven't looked at it, but Robert's Rules of Orders would say that the body could convene, you know, the chair could say, we are sitting now as the committee of the whole, and I think we would capitalize WHOLE, and thus as the city's budget advisory committee, and hold hearings and decide on amendments, and then adopt those proposed amendments, recommend a version, you know, recess or adjourn as the committee of the whole, and then convene as the full council at some point, you know, when they're ready to adopt the budget. And
right, I mean, you're sort of exactly right, everything you say there, and it might be better. I mean, I need to understand what the state requirements are, and what Janice's memo is talking about. Right. But you're basically right. The committee of the whole is the budget committee, and it would be a way to take advantage of council rules to get some extra layers of engagement into the process, you know, because it would be a committee hearing.
Right. So that may be up to the council too. There is well, yeah, I'd have to go back to this. I revised the local budget law in 1977, but not since then. I haven't really looked at it much since 1980, but so I'm sure it's probably got some nuances, but the option now is that either have a citizen budget advisory committee that's like half council, half citizens, and meet, and they all get together, and then they make recommendations to the council, and then the council decides whether they're going to adopt those recommendations or something different. Because we're subject to the Tax Supervising Conservation Commission, that's the backstop to make sure that local jurisdictions, including the city of Portland, are abiding by state law and their own charter provisions, and aren't playing footsies with accounting or, or et cetera, and fall appropriately under the different tax limitation measure compression ratios, and are abiding by any special levies, that appropriate to the legal constraints thereof. So it could be, I mean, there's some talk, I think I've heard, about the council of 12 deciding that they would have a budget committee that wasn't all 12 of them. Right? There could be subcommittees by service areas, like maybe, and then they would hear the advisory committee recommendations by subject area, et cetera. And then because, okay, so there's 6 service areas. Are there 6 members? That's short of a majority. So they could then say, we're going to look at all 6 of these. We've heard them all. Now we'll be the committee, the budget committee, as opposed to service areas. So I don't know. It's just, I'm trying to think of how to not have the council be the sole committee of the whole and then adopt, to go through the process twice. Maybe they should, because they'll get more
Yeah,
public.
I mean, my envision is, using just a purely legislative approach, that it gets referred. The committee of the whole is maybe confusing, but it gets referred to the budget committee, which is all of them. And then the budget committee could have subcommittees to look at specific service areas and in detail, that sort of thing. But you're right. We need to understand this legislative process. It hasn't even been written yet. But I think it's an opportunity to present to the transition and Tate, and present to the budget office to consider, because I'm worried that the budget office does not realize that the minute the mayor drops the budget into the council, the mayor's control over the budget is gone. Is entirely up to the council to do what it's going to do. So it would be worth it, I think, to bring council members up to speed in detail. Anyway.
And I have a logistical question, which is, does the mayor still then have a tie-breaking vote for the final budget if it ever got to that point?
In theory.
In theory, right?
Right. I don't know what council president would ever bring that up to a vote at a time.
Yeah, true. So I guess my question is just trying to follow along. We're talking about a legislative process that's just this kind of like 2 months between the proposed budget and the council adopting.
Right.
And I guess my question is, would there not be, say, a budget committee that precedes the proposed budget, and that be, I mean, I don't necessarily see the need of it being a committee, like everybody in the budget committee in that respect, where you can then still have ample public comment and a more, intentional community engagement that precedes the mayor actually kind of setting the table, if you will.
Well, if you go
Okay.
back a slide.
Yeah,
just
go
real-
back to slide. That's good point, Zach.
Um,
And you, June, there we go.
you know, there's, I have
Well,
the
you've got,
economic outlook and the trial budget and the initial budget guidance and the economic forecasts. The council gets briefed somehow, and that's either the full council or a narrower finance committee or the government operations committee or something. But I think that's where that happens.
Okay.
And I think Janice's memo suggests
So-
that should be the full council.
so like, but per Zach's point, January, February, the advisory bodies provide early input. That's not necessarily to the mayor. It would be in these listening sessions in town hall, and the listening sessions wouldn't be the mayor, the budget office. It would be the council's budget committee.
Or it would be the service area budget advisory committees, right?
The count. Oh, yeah. Well, that's
However, the city wants to realign itself for budget advisory committees to.
oh, right. That's what I meant by advisory bodies. I'm assuming yeah. I'm already making that assumption because I
Yeah.
think it's a great outcome. Rather than individuated bureaus have service area advisory committees. So they've already got some citizen input on how to collaborate and coordinate and economize in these bundles of
Mhm.
similar services. So February, March, you've got the budget council standing committees, which would be like their standing finance committee or budget committee, and the budget subcommittees with comments from advisory groups. So it's sort of,
Yeah, I mean, I guess if we to come back to the question that I had is if we wanted to say the committee of the whole is the budget committee, then I think it would be important that there's continuity prior to the mayor, like where there is like public briefings prior to the mayor's proposed budget, so that there's an opportunity. I mean, I would just really love there to be an investment in some more participatory budgeting process that's not just the mayor setting the agenda and then having 7 weeks to deliberate and have, maybe 2-3 listening sessions where there's 9 hours of ad nauseum feedback from the public that is probably not really going to be realistically listened to the extent that we would like in a more proposed intentional budgeting process. Because at that point, it's really like single issue considerations that are probably going to be 2/3 of all of those public comments.
so is there some way to, in this service areas submit budgets, they're going to be with the workshops and the in-district budget hearings to make those kind of joint between the budget office, the mayor and the budget office, administrator, mayor.
Yeah,
administrator,
I mean,
and the council's budget subcommittees?
well, maybe I'm looking at it all wrong. Maybe the reality is the legislative process is fine, but what I'm calling for is more participatory action within the advisory bodies.
Right.
And the advisory bodies, it's a little bit more grassroots, and therefore the legislative,
Yeah, I guess
yeah.
I would say, is that going to involve both the mayor and their structure, the administrator and budget office, and council budget subcommittees or budget?
Yeah,
Let me
yeah.
let me jump in real quick here, because we sort of have a time limit on this, and I think we'll get to the budget advisory committees in a minute or two, and also, this chart, these charts here are at the level of trial balloons. They're pre-recommendation recommendations. maybe two pre recommendations that I think this is something to sit around the table with Tate and the budget committee to see. I mean, if they're immediately choking on this, I want to know why and what they're choking on. And likewise, I want to see what the council rules drafting is considering for some of this stuff too. So I think I hear some good comments here and some direction, and I think we can refine this and then float that trial balloon and see what happens. Right?
Yeah.
I'm up for you wordsmithing it, Terry.
Okay. Well, Julia all helped a lot.
Yeah.
In organizing thoughts and recommendations
as always.
And I think this is anyway, it's a start. Zach, before I go to the next section.
So the only other thing that I think about is if you are pushing it to the committee of the whole, does that effectively change who is chair and vice chair and presiding officers of managing that? And maybe that's like the designation, or I don't know, but like that would be the other like little thing to consider, is there could be a political dynamic of the presiding the president, the council president, being like, I don't want to kick this because I don't trust the assigned chair of the committee of the whole. I don't know, or something. Yeah.
I mean, that's a really good question, and I think the answer is, at least current code says that the council decides the presiding officer, and the council decides all this. But elsewhere, the presiding officer tends to preside over the committee of the whole too.
Yeah, I would assume that, but I don't want to presume something that's wrong.
That's a loose end. Good question. Okay, so let's go to the next section here. A couple slides forward. Okay, so the recommended improvements. I guess go on to the next. So these are the recommendations. These are like the top level headlines in the document that you guys got. And then underneath these recommendations, there were some specific examples and what peer cities are doing. And then we tried to line them up to what the earlier objectives and visions were. And I think this covers a lot of territory. But again, thanks to Julia to help organize thoughts and get this into a good form. Yes. So Fred and Zach, thoughts on this stuff?
I would just want to clarify they improve the advisory committee structure to be really explicit of the expectations and standardize, I think, advisory committee structure to ensure that there's appropriate public records law, records, and this kind of like choose your own adventure that the bureaus have been on, I feel like is incredibly inappropriate and not successful. From the fact that we can go in, we can't even find out what bureaus are thinking or what their advisory committees are thinking because we don't have access to it as a public body. Like that's not acceptable. So I would want to strengthen the language of 6, but otherwise I think the rest of the list is good.
Yeah, I think that's right. In the document itself, I think there's some more meat on the bones there, but I agree. This is also, again, jumping ahead in the meeting a little bit. This is where I think we need to do the more significant stakeholder-ish engagement to understand this stuff a little bit. I think we're going to get a range of opinions and a range of ideas, but I think it's pretty clear that this needs to be sorted out.
Yeah, the Salinger testimony was compelling, I thought, about the Public Utility Board and how they were given kind of just general figures the day before they were expected to testify to council and not have any detail and not have any preceding sessions with a BES. It struck me as just appalling that we would put a citizens advisory committee that's established by ordinance in that kind of a situation. I can't imagine it being any better with the citizen advisory boards for the budget for the different bureaus, the bureau advisory committees. But I think we'll find that out when we talk to the stakeholders. So Zach, I'm thinking that the language on 6 is sufficient for now, knowing that we're gonna push this a lot further when we come up with recommendations after our consultation with all these frustrated citizens that are on these budget advisory committees of the individual bureaus.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, go ahead, Seth. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm maybe projecting what I anticipate we hear. So
yeah,
but
I don't blame you a bit. I'm a little concerned, Terry, about 7. I'm not sure that I don't know. I assume that because there's a petition circulating now to put participatory budgeting on the November ballot. I assume that the city's budget office is looking at how it would work so that they can respond to questions neither pro nor con. And is that what we were suggesting here? Because I don't think we should get ahead of the voters, and get involved in a ballot measure that well, assuming that it makes the ballot, by the timing would be such that our recommendations might affect the outcome of that measure. And I kind of hesitate to do that. Unless
That's a good question. Do you know when the signatures are due?
Well, I don't. It's usually 90 days before. Well, let's see. There's the state. Well, no, I know what the state process is, but I don't know what the local process is.
Yeah, well, we'll have to check on that. I guess,
Right.
The thought on that is that, that pops up in some of our peer research.
Right.
And, there's information there that's interesting to me. I don't know what to do about it. We could take a walk and let the voters figure it out for themselves. Because that's what they're going to do anyway.
Right.
But whether
it has a process of citizen input where they get to prioritize kind of by straw poll can reprioritize a percentage of the city's general fund. And that would, if the council doesn't adopt it, then they got to have a darn good reason, is kind of my understanding. Jose's been tracking a lot closer than I have, but he's not joining us anymore. But let's just understand participatory budgeting now, which I guess is the same as exploring it.
Maybe that's where we are at this point. I have opinions about it.
Well, yeah, I'd be happy to share mine too, but let's see what the measure implies and what the budget office is doing. Okay.
Right. Okay. Anything else on these sorts of things? I guess I would encourage you all to take a look at the document itself and see that things are lining up with the right language. I think that would be helpful. These recommendations on this chart are popping out with like, oh my gosh, look, that's a lot of really great stuff. But I think the document has a lot of really great stuff.
No, agreed.
Okay. Well then, nothing else on this. Go ahead to the next slide. Discussion. Maybe the slide after this one. Here we go. Early stakeholder engagement. Okay, so given what you've heard and what we need to do, we've got a big trial balloon process on the process. And then we've got some recommendations that we need to flesh out a little bit. And our original idea was that we would do some engagement in April with sort of high level budget thinkers, and try and make sure that we understand and that they understand our preliminary recommendations, and sort of get that sorted out and see what people think, early on. And then we came up with a list of possible early engagements. And then I think in the process of putting this stuff together, Julie and I kind of thought, well, okay, that's maybe a bit much. When the listening sessions are going on, everybody who's involved in budget is going to be involved in budget. And maybe we can focus a little bit. So this is sort of a view of what the early engagement looks like April-ish. Right? Am I remembering this right, Julia? I think that's right.
Yep, you're good.
So, and again, I think the trial balloon stuff gets a meeting with the budget office and or both the transition team. And then, the city staff and the Bureau Advisory Committee members would get a survey that I think, as the next slide will show, we'll be able to explore some of those questions. So I think the next slide. So here are the budget or survey questions that sort of came out. Now these are too many of them, and some of them are open-ended. That might be like a homework assignment for people, but I think some of it can be narrowed down. Some of it can be multiple choice. Some of it we could probably drop and wait for later. But this is where we might need your input on as well. Julia, you have more on this too?
No, I mean, I guess kind of goes back to like Zach and Fred's conversation earlier. I think what we're proposing is, to the extent we can do engagement in April. And remember, this is just the early, the big engagement time is in the summer, to, again, as Terry said, kind of prioritize getting some initial feedback from the city budget office and the transition team. And then 2, sending out a survey to the staff and members of existing budget advisory committees. I have found out from the city that there are 13 of those. So just to give you a sense, I don't know how big they are, but there's 13 active ones. So you're talking about sending a survey to 13 staff and, less than 100 folks. We'll see what the return rate is, but I do think kind of based, and Fred, I see your hand, I'll stop talking in 1 sec. I think the recommendation around improving the budget advisory committees is the squishiest. so far of your recommendations, there's a lot of questions. And so, could we get to 10 or less kind of questions that you all agreed to today that I could drop in a survey and we can start getting them out and really let people have most of April to complete it.
That's super helpful. And so Fred.
Off of mute. Okay. Yeah, no, I think first of all, the first two questions could be consolidated. What works or doesn't work about your budget advisory committee? And that just gives them a chance to say, okay, it's a success or it ain't, folks, and here's why. But I'm very interested, and I'd like them to put in writing either the bureau staff that's staffing, and it's usually, I don't know whether it's the director or there's some budget office, some budget person in each bureau. I don't know now of the 17 that how are you selected? Why are you on the committee? Are you a client of the services that this bureau provides? Are you just random chosen citizen to increase diversity? Are you because you're a citizen as opposed to having some other relationship with the bureau? And my subcontext here is I suspect that some of these, if they're not just moribund, ineffectual committees because they're not consulted with, that they're just rubber stamped and they may be indeed just captive members. So I'd kind of like to know, and not just the chairs, but every member of a budget advisory committee, why are you on the committee, or how do you think you were chosen, and how long have you been? And then I think the other questions are appropriate to, like how much information do you get before you have to give advice on a budget, how early in the process, or is it like the Public Utility Board the day before you're supposed to testify to council? So there we go. I don't know, I think you're right, Julia, that perhaps it is squishy to ask anyone other than the budget office or maybe future council members if it's appropriate to consolidate the budget advisory committees into service areas. They may all feel kind of proprietary about it. They may be that the bureaus feel proprietary about their relationship to their fellow bureaus in each of the 6 service areas, which is why we're not seeing any reduction in bureaus in the current city reorg plan. Enough said.
Yeah, Fred, thanks. I appreciate that. I think we'd want to smoke out any proprietary stuff. If that's what people are feeling like, we should understand that. But I don't know. I don't know what people are thinking. Zach.
So I've been thinking a little bit about this, and I'm sorry if I was supposed to send ahead my questions. My bad, but okay. So I think there's different questions depending on if it's to a back member or to city staff. But I think, an innocuous question that could unveil some insights for back is, how did you learn about the opportunity to be on the budget advisory committee? In what ways were you prepared for your participation? I think is a way of trying to figure out if they were given information. Was there any training or overview of prior year's budget? For staff, I was thinking, in what ways did you make information more accessible, i.e. minutes or meeting packets, ADA accessibility, that kind of stuff? How is the position on the back promoted? So looking at it from the other direction, do you record your meetings? It's kind of similar to the prior one. And then what is the attrition rate? How many people not stay on your committee? I think might tell us something indirectly about its success as a I would also, I mean, maybe this is kind of off the cuff here, but like, how many applicants did you receive versus, as a ratio of the members that you have on your budget advisory committee? I would be willing to bet that it's pretty much a 1-to-1 ratio. And their promotion is probably individualistic, which is not what a public involvement is supposed to look like. So I don't know. That's just a couple of smatterings. I can write them up and send them in an email, but that's where my mind's at.
Yeah, I think that's pretty helpful. I guess we'll try and figure out how to do this so that we don't overwhelm folks. But Julia, you?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote down what Fred and Zach said. I mean, so I could either screen share, but again, all we've done is add now to what it's already a really long list. So I think if you can help, this is too many questions. So just if we can, whatever way is easier for you, I can read ones that neither of you spoke about, because maybe that means you don't think we need to ask them right now, or whatever is kind of the easiest way.
Could we maybe just like process of elimination, just read each one and then thumbs down, thumbs up, and then I think we'll at least cut it in half, I would imagine, the number of questions we have. Maybe that's not the most efficient though.
It may be. Or do we want to bifurcate between what we ask bureau and budget staff versus what we ask the citizen back members? For instance, what is it, the fifth bullet down about focus on service areas versus bureaus. I would ask that of budget office staff and maybe bureau staff, just to get their responses and ideas. But I'm not sure that individual member of an individual bureau's budget advisory committee is that familiar with the service area concept and what its implications are for future improvements. So I kind of would not ask that, but I think I already said that.
I would just, so I think logistically speaking, I only have the emails of the 13 staff that staff budget advisory committees. I would prefer to create one survey tool that has demographic data collection, like all of our surveys. And one of the questions will be, are you an employee, right? Like, are you staffing a budget advisory committee, or are you serving on one, or both? Okay. And we can disaggregate the data. And we can always add answers like, I don't have an opinion, or I need more information, versus creating two separate survey tools and trying to get the staff to send.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Why you want to run through each of these now then?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. Or Terry, how is that?
Yeah, let's do it.
We have plenty of time. Like this, I mean, honestly, stakeholder engagement is kind of our final agenda item, and would be helpful for me if we can leave this meeting with you all in agreement, so we can make the tool and send it out in a couple of days. I think the more time,
good.
The better. So I'm actually going to start at the top. So this would be showing your whatever it is, 7 very drafty recommendations, and asking people, how likely do you think these recommendations are to improve community engagement in the city's budget process? And it would be a scale of like, I think it's super would, so like it wouldn't do anything at all, and things in the middle. I guess
we're sticking. It's simply a Likert scale. There's no room for comment.
We can have a little box if you want.
I would prefer to have a box. I would definitely prefer to have a box, but then a Likert scale is fine too.
So maybe up thumbs, sideways thumbs of being indifferent, or down thumbs. Okay. And then the recommendation, so question 2 would be what works and what doesn't work about your budget advisory committee? Thumbs up, sideways, thumbs down. Okay. Question 3 would be, do you have, nope, sorry. New question 3 would be, how long have you served on the committee and why did you want to serve on the committee?
Yeah. I kind of like,
Choose sideways. Yeah.
well, sort of,
I think
you want, I might want to rephrase that a bit.
Well, we can like do a priority and see if we have way too many, we could go back to like partial.
I like the question, the intent behind the question is to know why are you on the, if you are a back member, how did you get appointed and what's your relationship to the Bureau, I guess, or why, yeah, why were you appointed and how long have you served? Maybe that's pretty simple and doesn't get into whether they're clients or not.
Well,
But
I think that how long have you served is a really easy.
is
And
what,
that's
Terry?
probably
Not
how long have you served is a really easy question to ask and easy to get an answer, and that'll give us a feel somewhat of the problem. How you got appointed, it could be long stories, or but maybe that's best for an interview later in the summer.
Mhm.
I've got it in the maybe category for the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like something about the promotion of the opening. This is where it's hard to like have a universal survey for me, because it's kind of like a how did you promote it versus how did you hear about it. But
Oh, right. Why did you appoint so and so these why did you put these people on your advisory committee as opposed to why did they pick me to be on their budget advisory committee? And that you're going to might get two different answers.
You know, this is where the bifurcation between staff and member would help, right? You'd ask the staff, well, how did you promote this? You ask the member, how long have you served and how did you hear about it?
Could you, Julia, bifurcate this question so that if you are a Bureau budget staffer, you're staffing the back, how does your Bureau select or appoint these citizens? And the backside of that, the reverse is, if you are a back member, why are you on this Bureau's advisory committee?
and Fred, I think I'm hearing something a little bit different than my intention too.
Okay.
Because so I agree that your point is a good, it's a good question as well, which is like, why did you appoint the person? But I'm also interested in like, how did you go about getting applicants? Like, is it a one-on-one basis of like, hey, I know you from the industry, like my trade, I would like you to be on it, or is it, you know, posted on government jobs or something and having anybody apply?
So,
Right.
yeah, and I think some bureaus don't even do their own promotion, but so something like and yes, to Fred's point, we can bifurcate. So I think it could be like, if you're a staff, how do you promote and select committee members? If you're a member, why did you want to serve?
Good.
Close.
Yeah, close enough for now.
Yeah, we can, okay.
We'll perfect it, I know.
Do you have the time, resources, staffing, and access to information to do your work? If not, why not?
Yeah, and I think that applies to both members, the staffers and back members.
Do you have a thumb to provide, Fred?
Harry, you're equivocal.
I think that's actually a great question. but maybe it gets rolled into the first one, what works, what doesn't. Um, it gives a hint as to what to talk about rather than being so completely open-ended. And I don't know,
We could add a like, for example,
for example,
you
and does
know,
that do the same
time,
thing?
resources, staffing, access to information. For the first, or what's the second question, I guess?
Well, the consolidated and the 1 and 2, and then if not, why not? Yeah.
I mean, I guess that's fine. I think that's a overwhelming question now, but I would like there to be 2 questions to probe at that, because we could get different answers.
That's
Especially, yeah, especially if it's like, I don't have the access to materials. I also hated the method of engagement that like, they may not be bulletizing their entire list of why they thought it was dysfunctional or why it was successful, whatever it is.
Right.
That's a good point. That's fair.
Yeah, I mean, I've noted Terry's being a one sideways, so maybe we'll see where we end up. So the next is, should the Bureau Budget Advisory Committee structure be focused on service areas versus bureaus to broaden their scope and allow them to consider trade-offs across different bureaus?
And I'll just pipe up here in some thinking, is maybe we don't really want to ask those structural questions. Those are above the pay grade of everybody that we'll be talking to.
Yeah.
Those are really important to the budget office and the transition, but maybe less so here. And maybe that's where we get,
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's going to be helpful now. Even though it's a salutary goal, but in a kind of an opinion survey of these people, it may not. I'm not sure what our answers would be and how we would utilize those answers or assess them.
Do you want me to delete it?
I think that's what Zach's thumbs down. Is that what that means, Zach? Yeah. Okay.
Let's.
Yes, delete.
Hold on. Okay, let's move on.
Where's the chat?
This was one of Zach's additions. In what ways were you prepared for your service? Was there training and overview of prior year's budgets? And actually, I'll just say, I don't know if it's exactly the same, but the next one was for staff. In what ways do you make information accessible?
Well, that's
Right.
very simple. Do you have the resources, staffing, and access to information to do your work?
Yeah, and again, I was coming at it from a bifurcated survey, so if you can consolidate those, that's great. And I think utilizing that first language and maybe tweaking 1-2 words to make it so it doesn't seem weird to a staffer, that's great. That's fine.
I'm sorry, are we saying this is subsumed by the time, resources, access to information question?
Right.
I'm with you. Okay. Sorry, I'm just gonna make a note. So this was a Zach. Do you record your meetings?
I think that, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think public records are very important. Are your meetings, are your meetings public meetings, and are they recorded? Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it could be, we could add to it maybe to make it so it's not so punchy, but.
Yeah. Well, I like that. That gets us to, all right.
It could be like, how are your meetings documented? Are they recorded? A video recording or meeting minutes or
Right.
and what materials are available to the public?
Right, and is notice given? Are they public meetings? Is notice given of public meetings? So we want to work with the public meetings, which includes recording and notice and recording and basic notice and recording and openness that somebody could sit in and listen. They can't participate, but they could listen, and would probably likewise say a non-back member could obtain the Bureau's information same time that it's distributed to back members and have some sense of it. And do backs have hearings? And that gets us to, we don't know that. It'd be interesting if any of them do. I somehow suspect they don't, because it seems like it's all internal to the bureaus and their current commissioners submitting their budget recommendations that have been rubber stamped or approved by, I'm sorry, modified and approved by their budget advisory committee.
Okay, so something about kind of, I wrote a lot of it down, but documentation, I'd say transparency and openness to community, for example, meeting notices, meeting recordings, meeting minutes, materials available to the public, opportunities for the community to engage. Yeah. Can I get thumbs? Terry, you had 2 thumbs. Is that like a double
Great.
into it?
Oh.
Okay. Zach, what is the attrition rate?
I'm going to guess that nobody knows.
Well, yeah, I can see where individual back members would not know. They might tell us that they resigned 3 years ago, and why is the city still listing them as a member? I don't know. That's sort of a question for bureau staff. And let's not go there, I don't think, in this survey.
That's fair.
I think we get enough information on what works or doesn't work about it.
Okay, I'm gonna move us on. This one, I am back to like our list, but I'm not sure which bullet we're on. So should budget advisory committees be standalone budget advisory committees, or should they include performance reviews or other oversight?
This is the one structural one that I kind of like, in that I'm not sure there are any sort of other advisory committees doing that work at that level. But I don't know that either.
I do know that there's often, when you get to having worked in the Secretary of State's office with the auditors division and sitting in on management meetings, and there's a difference of opinion of what a performance review is, and how extensive it is, and what the recommendations are from a performance review. But I've always been in favor of some kind of making sure that the Bureau knows what its mission is and how successfully they're fulfilling their mission. So I just, with the caveat that performance review or other oversight, that allows for the ambiguity, I think. So I'm all for it. I think let's find out if any of them do. I sincerely doubt it.
Just before I get to Zach, I guess the quick response would be on performance review might need an edit there. I mean, I'm not considering that as reviewing the performance of the director. I'm thinking, how is the Bureau performing? Are you meeting expectations on your metrics that your outcome-oriented blah, blah, blah is doing? That's what I mean by that. You want to get confused. But Zach.
So I don't love the wording of the question because I feel like it's a little bit leading. And I'm wondering if we can fold it somehow into a much more benign question, like what are suggestions that you have for improving the overall, I don't know, values or benefits of a budget advisory committee, or I don't know, something along those lines. But then you could put like several EGs. So it's not so explicit, like, do you like this as an idea? Because I just hate surveys that do that, because it's clear like what the intent is there.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering if like there's I realize this is a separate question, Julia, but maybe there's one where it's like more of a generic, like other, oh, maybe it's the last question, the last bullet point. Sorry, it's always hard for me to read that. But like, what other recommendations to improve community engagement in the city budget process would you propose? Maybe not that, not great, but like
No.
putting it to them as like, what other recommendations do you have for improving the budget process?
Um,
And then, you know, you could say like improving community engagement, like in parens there, you could say improving community engagement. And then like say, do you have specific examples or
well,
performance reviews, something along those lines?
you to the first half of that, not with the performance reviews, we're allowing a box for the first question. What do you think of these recommendations? How likely do you think these are to improve the process? 1 to 5 per recommendation, and that includes transparency, early access, etc. And so maybe that last question should follow that first question. Or wait, maybe just it's the last question because they've answered all these other questions and given more cause to think about how they're going to answer that last question. If they answer the survey at all, we'll see what our response rate is.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm totally following your train of thinking, Fred, but I think that, yeah, just having like a more of a generic space where they, you know, we could maybe suggest they have sharing of recommendations or ideas, one of which could be as a idea, performance reviews or other oversight.
Let me just, so probably deleting the question, the specific question I just read, should they be standalone or should they include these other things? But probably editing the last question. Okay, we'll get to the last question in a bit. Okay, blah. What, if any, relationship should there be between budget advisory committees and the city budget office? Currently, budget advisory committees don't have relationships with the city budget office. Is that another leading question?
And again, I think this is one of those structural things that I don't know that they have a say. You know, the embedded question there is, did your work have any impact whatsoever on the budget? You know, but I don't know if you can ask that one. Is that leading too much too?
Yeah, I mean, maybe we fold that into, you know, suggestion of ideas and recommendations, which is like more involvement from city budget office or direct involvement from city budget office, performance reviews or other oversight, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's good, Zach. I like that.
Are folks okay with that? Okay. When should budget advisory committees be operational? Part of the year or ongoing? If part of the year, when should their work begin?
Yeah, that's good.
See, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Sorry. What role should budget advisory committees have in community engagement? I guess we kind of, did we add that to something? Well, kind of. There's like the public, like hearings and stuff, part of the meeting documentation question. I don't know if that's the same, but just wanted to bring that up.
It's not quite the same. There's some duplication. So you're asking for their opinion on community engagement, and I think that wouldn't hurt to hear, because these are people that either staff or serve on bureau budget advisory committees. So BBACs, I guess. And so I'd be interested in what their answers are to that. The example's fine. On the other hand, budget town halls are kind of bigger than allowing public access to their meetings. Maybe, I guess that's more, yeah, no, I kind of.
It definitely is more, I mean,
it's not duplicative. I think it's a standalone question and it's worth asking.
One of the peer cities we researched had their advisory committees do budget, like town halls or listening sessions. That's probably where the example is coming from. Okay, thumbs on the community engagement one. Sideways. Okay, so we might not do that, but let's keep going. Do you make written recommendations to the city and do you get written responses from the city?
Is that from the city or from your bureau?
I don't think we don't specify.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, that's, I think, clearly a question to the committee members. And if you're staff, I don't know.
Right.
How you would respond to that. You would have to just invert it to saying, do you respond to committee members who write recommendations? We kind of did that in a previous question.
Oh, right.
I think we could figure out the wordsmithing if you want to ask it. I think right now we just want to see if it's something you want to ask.
Well, I kind of do, because if you go to public record and you're getting the time, resources, staffing, access to information to do your work, that's different than what the advisory committee recommends. And if they get feedback, like why they were ignored or their recommendations were overwhelmingly approved.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, I don't know, Terry, I'm not trying to speak on your behalf, but like this kind of relates back in my mind to like Terry's previous question about, it's like, how do you know what happened to the advice? You know, I mean, it's like, what is the impact? And I know that the city's been having this conversation maybe in general with advisory bodies, like if there are written recommendations, which I'm not even sure there always are, is then there's sort of a response like, hey, yeah, we're going to take these recommendations for X, Y, and Z reason, and we're not taking these recommendations for A, B, and C reasons. You know, I guess maybe it's an accountability kind of question.
So can you bifurcate it?
Sure. I mean,
yeah, like we did the other one.
Well, let me do thumbs. Like, do folks want to keep this? Yes. Okay. So we'll figure out. Then maybe let's spend another minute or so on it. Do folks want to suggest any kind of nuances here that you want to make sure gets in this question?
Well, does your BBAC make written recommendations to your bureau? And if so, do you get written responses from the bureau? And that's to the BBAC members. Then if I'm a bureau staffer, the director or whoever, does my bureau receive written recommendations from our BBAC, and do we give them written responses?
Yeah, the bifurcation I got. I mean, I just wanted to see if there was any other. Okay.
I don't have
we're
any
almost-
changes to it.
No,
We're
yeah.
almost done, I promise.
Good.
So I'm at this second to last bullet. I guess this is structural arguably too. So where do you think responsibility for community engagement in the city's budget process should primarily reside? For example, the city budget office, bureaus or service areas, city council, a community engagement department, something else?
I mean, although that's kind of structural, I kind of would be interested in just see what people think, you know, because this is a big structural thing for engagement. You know, this would be uneducated responses. I would,
Yeah. Well, and I think it's validating their current roles as citizens participating in it, or as bureaus staffing citizen committees to analyze the broader picture of community engagement per our broader mission as a working group and as GTAC. So I think it's an appropriate question. I'm thumbs up.
Zach?
Back. Okay.
Okay, last
It's a
one.
simple enough question.
Yeah.
So I think we decided we're keeping the last one, maybe just with some, for example. So this is, what other recommendations to improve community engagement in the city's budget process would you propose? For example, more involvement between the city budget office and budget advisory committees, performance reviews defined as reviewing the performance of like a bureau or service area, some other oversight provided by the committees.
Budget town halls, you could add that one.
Good.
Okay.
I do like that one though.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good like final question because they've had a chance to think about it.
Right. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, it was my earlier thought that they've answered these other questions, and that really gives them a shot at analyzing this final.
Okay. Well, that's 9, which I don't think is too many, but I wouldn't want to add, like, some of them are kind of meaty. Do you want me to read them back? Do you feel like you got it? Okay.
We got 7 minutes left, and I think 9 is sufficient. And I'm expecting about an 8% response rate, but I don't think it would change if they were less meaty, to be honest.
Yeah, no, and I mean, we won't do it that you have to answer every question, or people can kind of fill out what they want. And I think you all probably saw that budget advisory committee assessment that was done, that I sent you the report from, and they did a survey and had pretty low response rates. So probably.
Oh, I didn't see that. Can you?
I'll turn it back to you, Tori.
yeah, okay, so let's move on to the next slide or something like that. Next steps, yeah, so the next steps. So here's what we'll do. Chair and staff will revise our proposals based on discussion today. We will request budget office and transition team to respond to our trial balloons, and we'll get a survey together ready to go, send it out. Work group members are advised that maybe watch a budget listening session coming up. In fact, I think GTAC members will be testifying at some of those as GTAC members. Some will be testifying as not GTAC members, but I think that will be an interesting experience to see how that works. And then just continue to revise, refine recommendations, anything that catches your attention after we close up this meeting and you need to get off your chest, send it. And I think this was good discussion. Fred.
Yeah, I just Googled committee of the whole and Robert Rules of Order. It's 11th edition, pages 529, 542. It's used primarily by legislative bodies to provide a description of how a large board may use a committee of the whole as an opportunity for informal discussion for a meeting. And so like Congress has a different quorum requirement that it's not as, doesn't have to be all 7. But it's a way to shoot ideas around without having a formal adoption. And so it is capital C, capital W, a term of art, but just FYI, if you're going to use the term at all, that's what it means.
So you said the 11th edition?
Yeah.
What year is that from, Fred?
No, it doesn't say here. I'm looking at let's see.
Okay, so I think that's it. Am I forgetting anything, Julia? Before we go
Just
to the
there's a doodle pull out so I can schedule your next meeting. It will be it's only a few days are in the doodle poll because we have a short window between kind of when you'll reconvene, post this survey, and when our draft recommendations are due to all of GTAC. So if you haven't completed it, if you can just take a minute, I mean, it's really like 4 options or something today, that would help me out. We can get our next meeting scheduled. I think that was it though. Thanks, Terry.
Yeah, and those are the rest of the meetings, see you all for voter education, see you all, the big ones. So I think that's it. Fred, anything else? Zach, anything else?
No.
Julia, June, thanks for your help.
Thank you all.
Great.
Thank you.
That's it. We're done. We're adjourned. See you guys next time.